I'm Matthew Kurbis, the subscription attorney, and this is Law Subscribed, your dedicated source for all things subscriptions and the law. Thank you to my sponsors. See links to them in the show notes. Everything discussed is only for educational and entertainment purposes. Enjoy the show. I'm thrilled to have with me today, and I know I say that at the start of every episode, but I'm extra thrilled today to have Jordan Furlong. Welcome to Law Subscribed.
Thank you very much, Matthew. It's terrific to be here today.
So I would not be surprised if the majority of my listeners are not already subscribed to your Substack at jordanfurlong.substack.com, link in the show notes. But just in case, Jordan, they haven't read anything that you've published yet or come across your thought leadership on social media, what do you write about? Who are you? What do you do? Give us a taste of who you are.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Well, I say that I'm a legal sector analyst, consultant, and author, which is the best way I can kind of put a wrapping around a really unusual line of work, which is that I write continuously and I speak continuously and constantly about change for the better in the legal services sector, in the legal marketplace, and just try to advise and suggest as many ways in which we can move forward as a profession, move forward as a sector, and really just engage in all kinds of conversations around that. So I've been doing this now off and on in various ways for a good 10, 15 years. If you count my brief time going back as far as briefly being a lawyer, probably close to 20. So yeah, I keep at it, and people haven't told me to stop yet. So I'll stick with it until then.
All right. Yeah, that's a good high level overview. And if the reason I said your Substack up front is because I kind of want for this episode for listeners to go on the Substack. Again, that's jordanfurlong.substack.com, because I'm going to be referencing a few articles there. And Jordan, I know that you could pull out I wrote an article on that in an instant. So I know you know your stuff backwards and forwards. So this is going to be good. But so for my listeners, if you just go in and you click on the search icon and you type in billable into the search, there's at least 10 articles that show up. And I don't know if the search results limited to only the top 10, but a lot of you've done a lot of writing on how the billable hour is really not adequate. You even recently wrote, well, I feel like you come up with a new article like at least once a week, but you wrote one that was called "There's No Such Thing as Non-Billable Hours." Mm-hmm. And that was really what made me want to, I've wanted to have you on the show for a long time, but that in particular, because when you're not billing your time already, like most of my listeners are, we talk about moving from billable to subscription and or flat fee.
Yeah.
You're already thinking this way. You're in this mindset because anything that's good for the business is good for the business and can keep subscribers, your clients subscribed, right? So you're thinking about things holistically. But what you seem to be trying to do, and correct me if I'm wrong, is just to sort of show the rest of the profession, if you will, and the users of the profession that it's time to start thinking about things in a different way. So tell us about the why you're doing this, in addition to some of the meat of the actual why law firms should be listening.
Well, yeah, and thanks. So the whole idea, that whole article about there's no such thing as a non-billable hour, it kind of came out of a conversation I was having. I was speaking at a law firm retreat down in the U.S. About a month or so ago, and having a conversation with the firm's business development director. We were kind of lamenting the straitjacketed approach that any number of lawyers and law firm leaders often have in this area. And he was saying, yeah, you know what, there's a real interest in, yes, but if all this time I spend on this for marketing and this, it's non-billable. And I kind of said, yeah, but look, there's no such thing as a non-billable hour, right? Because look, okay, you're spending time marketing, you're spending time building up relationships with clients or potential clients and so forth. Maybe that's not billable today, but it's billable down the road. It's billable in a few months or a few years. And even if it doesn't turn into an actual engagement, it is still valuable because you are honing your skills and you are developing your abilities to build out in this area. And what I wanted to kind of break for law firms was a couple of myths of the many, many myths we have in this profession. But one of them was this idea that the only things that are valuable are things that are directly billable to the client. And it's no, that's not the case. And you see this problem in law firms all the time, right? Where the compensation and promotion decisions and in a lot of law firms are very heavily based around how many hours did you bill? Did you hit your quota? You can qualify for your bonus if you have some massive number above your expected quota. And it really develops this incredibly unhealthy perspective that says if it can't be billed directly to a client, it doesn't have value. And it's like, no, that's not reality. That's not how any functional law firm that I'm familiar with operates. So that was part of it. And the second was, and this is very much, I think, along the lines of the work that you're doing, also trying to break people of this idea that work should even be considered in that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing work of value to your client, you're doing what you're supposed to do. That is the purpose of any professional fundamentally, but especially a lawyer. And so the way in which law firms, business models especially, have become obsessed with this idea of we must, I don't know if you remember the old short story, The Rocking Horse Winner, where, the little kids
No,
in the rock.
And it has, in 100-something episodes, it hasn't been said on the podcast. So please tell us.
It's this very old short story about a little boy who has it's a rocking horse in his playroom, and he keeps hearing his parents, because it's written in the 30s or the 40s, whatever, maybe I don't know exactly when. They're very concerned about the cash. They said there must be more money. There must be more money. They say to themselves, and he's got this rocking horse is in some way magical. So he just gets on every night. There must be more money. There must be more money, back and forth, so that he can generate this money. And it's like, man, how did this develop? How did we get to this point where everybody is deeply invested in supporting a system that doesn't make anybody happy, even the ones who are profiting the most from it? So that's right. That was kind of what I was hoping to get across, is just to get lawyers to think differently about this stuff, because most of us have never had the opportunity to look at it in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. That reminds me of what you just said, of how there are these trend reports out there, and we won't name names here. Well, I won't. You can if you want, Jordan. But there are trend reports on law firms and how many hours they're actually collecting, right? Yeah. And it's only like 2 hours or something, right? And it's gone up. It used to be less, and it's gone up. And the industry looks at that and they're like, oh, let's help these lawyers bill more hours or collect more hours, when what they're not seeing in that data is lawyers don't like to bill hours. They don't like it. Nobody likes it.
No, absolutely right. And there's an interesting conversation to be had, and possibly a sociological treatise of some sort, into the ickiness that lawyers feel when it comes to money and charging and billing and so forth. Because although they really enjoy the money, and who doesn't, there's always this, and I'd love to know where it comes from, because it's pretty clearly bred in the bone early on professionally, this reluctance to engage with, well, I don't want to raise it with the client, I want to talk about this and so forth, which is, again, the sign of it's not a healthy relationship to it. But again, this is where we get this idea of, we're almost playing games with the client. We're sort of pretending that everything we're doing for them is, oh, it's okay, I'm just doing this and this and this, and it's all to your benefit. But we're also busily scribbling down our notes and our numbers and sending it out and so forth. And it's like, I have a radical idea. Let's be honest with our clients. Let's treat them like grown-ups, which we have a really hard time doing as lawyers. Let's give them enough respect to say, hi, I'm running a business, and this is the way in which I make money in my business. And I would love to take you on as a client, and I would love you to work with me in this respect. Can we work together on this basis, right? And clients like being spoken to as equals, because that's what they consider themselves as. So the more conversations, it's one of the points I always hammer home with lawyers is, please speak with your clients. And when you're finished speaking, listen for longer than you've been speaking, because A, it's what they care about, and B, it's really the point. The point of this entire silly profession of ours is that we are building relationships of value and meaning with our clients. So, yeah.
Right. A word you said a lot there was relationships, right? And so to cite another article of yours, The Legal World in 10 Years If We're Lucky. This is from November of last year. And I think this might have actually been when I started subscribing to the newsletter. And if you search for subscription outright, you're not talking about subscription pricing outright in your articles, but this relationship pricing that you talk about, when it's about the relationship, that seems to align with what we talk about a lot on the Law Subscribe podcast, because what you're doing is you're building these ongoing relationships. And there's value to just knowing that I could contact my lawyer and it's not going to cost me anything more.
Absolutely. That's a huge aspect that I don't think a lot of lawyers who do charge by the hour or by the whatever don't appreciate at all. It's again from the client's point of view. The client is sitting at home or at the office, and something comes up there. Oh, geez, I don't know about this. I'm a little worried, and so forth. And maybe they kind of reach for the phone or they reach for the keyboard and say, "Wait a minute. As soon as the lawyer picks up the phone, as soon as they open the email, they're on the clock, right? And the meter's running. And in the time it takes them to look at this and think about it and get an answer to me, and I've just, I've spent $80 or $150 or $600 or whatever, depending on who you're hiring and what you're talking about. So it's a disincentive. They say, I don't want to talk to my lawyer. And if you are creating a disincentive for your client to speak with you, you're doing it wrong. So again, the advantage of the approach that you're taking and the approach that I talk about with relationship pricing is remove those barriers and and just tell the client, I'm going to do all these things for you. We're going to list them. We're going to make a little chart here. You can tick off the boxes. These are things I'm going to do for you on a regular basis. And I'm not going to charge you for the actual event, but I'm going to charge you per month or per quarter, whatever the system is, X number of dollars. Now, we're also going to make a separate list here to say, here's the things that are not covered in this, right? I'm not going to defend you from a billion-dollar class action suit as part of my monthly fee. That's fine, right? Which is, again, people will understand that. But the idea of the relationship, when you encourage people to speak with you more often, to rely on you, to turn to you to say, I could just use someone to bounce this idea off you. Just tell me, I'm worried about this. Should I be worried? Am I worrying about nothing? I'm lying awake at night. I said, yeah, let them talk. In 5 minutes, you could give them peace of mind that is worth so much more than anything else. And it guarantees you they will re-up at the end of the month and the month after that, and on and on and on.
And one of the reasons I like month-to-month subscriptions is it incentivizes you got to keep providing that value. Like you must, and when your clients have that flexibility, like think about you as a consumer. Like I could unsubscribe whenever I want. That makes me feel better about the relationship between the parties, right?
No, absolutely.
So I feel like there's got to be a story though behind that relationship pricing idea, or maybe like like what, and maybe in part of this you could talk a little bit about Law21 and like the services that you do offer and like why you were even talking at the law firm, because I think we sort of skipped over that because I'm just so excited to talk about the future of law with you. So like talk a little bit about that, and maybe I don't know, like was there some experience that you had or helping out a law firm that like turned you into this or tuned you into the idea of relationship pricing?
I think, okay, so I'll answer the second one first. The relationship pricing idea actually emerged from a series of articles I wrote several years ago at my blog. My blog at my current website, Law21. I'm probably going to do some reno on that because it needs some work. But I was trying to get my head around how are we going to price, because I've, like any sensible person, I've been kicking the billable hour around for years.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, so what else are you going to use, right? Because it's easy to say don't do it, but what's your response?
Right.
So talked a little bit about market pricing, and how do you kind of price according to the market? But I said the problem there is that we don't have a market for legal services the way that any other market operates. There is no transparency. There is extraordinary limitations on who can sell what in what jurisdictions, et cetera, et cetera. So you can't really count.
It's almost like we have a monopoly on legal services.
Funny, isn't it? Weird that you might kind of look at it that way. Oh my gosh, the other thing you can look up is regulatory on my Substack, because I'm always going after that.
Yeah.
So what I began, I really kind of like wrote my way through it to say, all right, so upon what basis can you realistically and practically and constructively price your work? And so I came down to something that it was another piece I'd written a little while ago, and I kind of pulled the two of them together because I'd written an article some years earlier called "What Do Lawyers Sell?" And I ran through all the stand up. Well, we sell our time, we sell our expertise, and we sell this and that, and so on and so forth. And I've never found any of those answers satisfactory. And what I finally said at the end was, what we sell? We sell peace of mind. Going back to what I mentioned earlier, right? That the client comes to us, gives us something, and they unburden themselves. And every lawyer here who has sat through an initial meeting with a client, that's the unburdening, the lump of everything, not just the legal problem, but the life circumstances or the business issues or the person who's making all this, and they just everything at you, right? And they are unburdened. And then the lawyer says, okay, got this, thank you. All right, I'm going to do A, B, C, and D, and we're going to get working on this. And what the lawyer is saying in a way is, I got this. Okay. Or maybe more accurately, we got this. You got it. You have an ally now. You have an advocate. You have someone who can help you along the way. And they always walk out, or they should walk out of the office feeling better than they did before. Now,
Hmm.
that's not to say that can be a permanent condition. I remember a friend of mine knew a family lawyer who used to end her every single initial consultation when the new client got up to leave, shake their hand, and she said, "I need you to know something. You are never going to like me more than you do right now." Right? Which is a tremendously great way to establish the relationship, that's especially in family law, right? But it's
Yeah.
also part of saying, I'm gonna give you real talk, and I'm gonna tell you what's actually going on, and so forth. So what I realized was, if peace of mind is what we're selling, that's a personal thing. That's a human thing, and it is based on the client's sense of reliance, the client's sense of trust and ease around you, and that is a relationship, and that has value in and of itself. I would go so far as to argue, and I think this is a very reasonable argument to make. If you were, and again, you can tell me what you think, because this is your line of work. If you were on a relationship pricing or subscription pricing thing with a client, and the client didn't ask you for anything all month, I think you've still earned that monthly payment, right? I think you have, because you have been a resource. You've been there. Like, I don't want to say like insurance, because I despise the insurance industry with fear of a thousand suns, but in the same kind of idea, right? There is value knowing that you've got someone there who's got your back that you can turn to if you need to. So that's really what kind of drove that thought forward. And
Yeah,
when we're
and just to acknowledge, yes, I think that the answer is yes, with the small caveat that it depends on the practice area and the
Mhm.
amount being paid, right? Because unlike
Yep.
other industries, we do have our ethics to comply with, and what is
Hmm.
the fee reasonable, right? And as
That's true.
long as you could answer that question, yes, that's actually one of the reasons I target the latent legal market in my practice, and I start charging at only $20 a month,
Mm-hmm.
because absolutely, just being available is
Yeah.
worth to have a lawyer available is worth way more than $20 a month.
Oh
I
yeah.
think objectively, and any licensing body for attorneys would say that, right? So, now $1,000 a month, well, are they a small business owner? Well,
Hmm.
now maybe yes, if they
Yeah.
didn't contact you that month because they have, are they $1 million in gross revenue business? $1,000 a month is less than an employee, right?
Hmm.
So I think like context really matters, but
Yeah.
in the right context, and if the fee is reasonable,
Hmm.
absolutely just being available itself is a
Yeah.
subscriber benefit that could be worth the whole value of that monthly fee.
I think so as well. And yeah, in practical terms, if I was in that situation and the phone didn't ring or not an email came in all month, maybe I've got a pre-existing relationship to say, I call up and say, you know what, been a quiet month for you, just knock 50% off the payment, whatever, right? If you wanted to, right? It's entire, but again, is it appropriate, as you say, to the relationship? And that's what really matters.
Yeah, you can be magnanimous, right? Because one of the you talk about market pricing and look at the market. So one of my promises is my subscriber benefit is even at that $20 a month, you will get below market flat fee rates. So like in
Mm,
Illinois, attorneys will charge, at least in Lake Cook County, 650 to 850 flat fee for a closing. Well, I charge 450, right? Because I know the market. I want my
mhm,
clients to stay subscribed, and I want them to use me for other legal services. So I'm willing
mhm.
to charge less, a below market flat fee rate. But
Yeah.
what about a random contract? I don't
Mhm.
know. So I
Yeah.
charge $50 a page. That's
Mhm.
the way I make up that difference for a lack of there being a market.
Mhm.
And it's still a counting metric, which I don't like, but it's
Mhm.
easier to understand than the billable hour
Yeah.
because it's not like, what were you doing? It's a page. This page,
Mhm.
it's $50 per page. And if a client that has been subscribed for a long time sends me a one-page contract because like they went to their dog groomer, I love talking about the dog groomer one because I never expected it. Like, what other lawyer has helped advise on a one-page dog groomer contract? I have. So so like if they text me that page, I could be magnanimous and say, I'm waiving the $50 fee for that page because you've been a
Yeah.
good client. There's been
Yeah.
even maybe there were a few months that you didn't call me. I wanted you to. I'm always reaching out because I want you to stay subscribed.
Mhm.
But I could waive like a $50 fee, and it's not
Yeah.
a big deal for me because it's also not going to break the bank for my business.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's okay. I could do that.
Yeah. No, makes sense. And again, this is what I keep. I mean, and it's not even on the client side. When I'm talking to, I'm the next engagement I have with a law firm is going to be talking about generational gaps
Mm.
within the firm. And every firm that's come to me recently for anything, at least one of the issues they're dealing with is we've got all these tensions between and among the generations, especially the younger and the older ones, and how do we manage that and so forth. And one of the things, and I tell them two things. I said, number one, this is entirely natural, normal, and inevitable, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. So stop thinking that this is a problem to be solved, right? This is a problem to be solved in the way that, like, a rain coming in, and a rainstorm coming in is a problem. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
But the second thing I sort of say is, you work your way through this by talking to each other, right? I said the problem is that in a lot of firms, what a partner, normally it's a senior partner, right? An older person will say to me, occasionally this comes from a younger one too, but they'll say, I don't get them. I don't understand how those people are like, and their values are screwy, and they're this, and they don't want to do this, and don't want to do that. And I say, in the bad firms, what happens is that's the end of it, right? You sit there and you stew and you're annoyed and irritated. Whereas at the good firms, what happens is you say that, and then that's the start of a conversation. Then you go on to say, so help me understand, if you would, because I don't get your millennial, or I don't get your boomer point of view. I may not agree with it. I'll probably still find it stupid, but I would at least like to know what it is, and just have the conversation, right? This is something we don't talk to each other enough as lawyers, and we don't talk to our clients enough. Oh my gosh, it's like that's becoming a bit of a crusade.
It's hard when your time is so valuable to want to just get to know people and build those relationships even inside the firm, like you said. Yeah, I remember one of the reasons I stopped billing I left to start my own practice and stopped billing my time is I got off the phone with my father, and I was like, that was a really expensive conversation. and since then, and I was like, what am I doing? This doesn't make sense. But since then, I've come to realize that one of the ways that I try to convince lawyers to stop billing their time is also say those family conversations, they're not just worth whatever your billable hour rate is to your client. It's worth $1 million an hour.
Oh, yeah.
It is so much more valuable to spend time with your family, or to get to know somebody and build a relationship with them. It is, you should 1,000x your rate, 10,000x your rate. That's the value if you really are assigning time value, to money. So that's, that's where I've come along. So I'm amazed that we're almost 30 minutes into this conversation, Jordan, and we haven't mentioned AI. Even all the way back in August 23rd, you said, this is how the billable hour dies. That's one of these articles here, right? And so we're back then, and even before then, it's, you kind of saw the writing on the wall with Gen AI, not just reducing non-billable time. You've already talked about that, right? Yeah. But also reducing very clearly billable time. So, let's get your perspective, your journey on when you made this realization, how you see Gen AI, playing a role in the future of the way law is practiced.
Well, I think I came to the realization, Matthew, about 4 days after GPT-4 came out, which is coincidentally the week that I started my Substack, not expecting that would be the case. Mm-hmm. And I read about it, and I looked it up, and I played around with it a little bit, and I realized this is really going to change a tremendous amount. The way I put it in the article was that someone has gone and invented a words and language machine. And I said, and this is kind of going to be a challenge for us, because that's also a pretty good way to describe a lawyer in terms of a lot of the work that we do, right? So, and again, this is not an issue fundamentally around, people sort of say, I hear this all the time, will an AI replace lawyers, right? And what I'm increasingly inclined to say is, doing what precisely? What aspects of being a lawyer do you think it's going to replace? Because if you think it's going to replace your advisory role and your advocacy role and your whatever role, then no, of course it's not. But I tell you what, that is not most of what you, Mr. or Ms. Lawyer, spend your day doing. You're doing document review, document drafting and summarizing. You're doing legal research. You're doing contract analysis. You're doing all this kind of stuff. And that, yes, it is in fact going to replace you. It's doing it already. And in my Twitter feed is filled. I was going through today researching something else. My Twitter feed is filled with articles about law firms that have significantly reduced their billable hours, the number of hours they have to spend each year using AI, and they don't really have a problem with it, because what they're saying is, the smart ones are saying, but we can generate more value to our clients. But the reason why I said this is going to be fatal for the billable hour is so much of what we do as lawyers, and I do think this applies across the board to all kinds of practices, although it's probably more common in the larger to mid-sized firms, we do kind of busy work. We do a lot of this, tapping away, looking and reading and this and that and so forth. And we track and we build our times for this. I said generative AI is going to compress and accelerate, if not entirely replace, a lot of that work. Now, I said the build hours of your average law firm are its inventory. That's what they sell. And I get them in front of law firms and I say, and I'll tell you that what you're selling is actually what your inventory is build hours. Because when I get a bill from a law firm and I see the amount of money is not underneath the great things you did for me. The amount of money is underneath the amount of time you spent. So that is what you're selling. And this technology is going to shrink your inventory radically. So something that you would have been able to spend 100 hours on is now going to take you about 5. So if you intend to continue billing by the hour, either you have to multiply your billable rate by 20 times or you're going to lose money. So that is the reality. We have always, and I really think always is the correct term. We have always been very linear and sequential as lawyers. I'm going to do this and this and this, the next thing. One lawyer at one time serving one client on one job, whatever. And we track the time that we spend to do that because we don't have any other idea historically of how to actually measure the value we provide, and we send it out. I said, so the billable hour is not going to die because, not Nixon like me get up on a soapbox and shake my finger at you. It's going to be because the economics are going to collapse.
Right.
That's fundamentally what it is. And that's just on pricing. Don't get me started on internal compensation, although, or do if you wish.
Yes, Les, please. Because that's another article you have about how, stop giving our requirements to partners or something is like another article I saw come up. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, there's so many. I often say to people, as much as the billable hour for pricing annoys me, and it does, I really hate it in its internal use within law firms for measuring the contribution of value that lawyers make. And I'm not saying lawyers for now, never mind everybody else, but just stick with the lawyers.
Right.
First of all, of course, with associates or income partners or whatever the names we have for these people now, just the loading up of all of these hours it is so detrimental to so many things about lawyer development and lawyer lifestyle and lawyer health and wellness. But it's also fundamentally a pretty stupid way to leverage, right? Most smart businesses leverage technology or they leverage processes. Leveraging people is something that was a clever idea in 1931. We have gone past that now, right? So it's all that bad enough for that. But I said for partners especially, and again, this came up at another law firm thing I did several months back, where they were talking about, we want to get our partners to do more mentoring and more business development and more this and more that. But they say, we're having trouble meeting our billable hour requirements. And I said, so get rid of them.
Right.
Because as I said in my article, billing hours is one of the least valuable things a partner can do. Anybody can bill an hour in a law firm. And I'll say this because I billed an hour in a law firm. I didn't know what I was doing, right? But your partners are supposed to be your most valuable assets, and they can do 100 things of tremendous value to the client, to the firm, to the community, to everybody else you want. And you're incentivizing them to, review documents and marketing. No, drop the quota altogether. And above all, I said, and I've been saying this for years, explain to me why it is that partners themselves maintain partner billing quotas. I said, I thought the whole point of becoming a partner was that you didn't have to do this stuff anymore, right? This is what you graduated for, right? So anyway, there's so many little pathologies in the way law firms work, but at least we're talking about them now.
Yeah, and I'm gonna pull on that thread of you used to have to bill your time at firms. We're gonna come back to that, but related to like the whole partners having to bill time, and that's the way you work yourself up and all that. A conversation I will often have on the podcast is about how, in particular, the large firms, the traditional law model has not done a great job with retention of women and attorneys of color and women attorneys of color, right? And so, what you just described, I think, is part of the problem there. And most of my guests on my podcast who have ditched the billable hour and started their own innovative practice are a woman attorney of color, or woman attorney of color, right? So they're leaving big law and they're going out there and doing something innovative. So, what have you seen? Have you seen any of that? Are you having those conversations with firms as well about how do we do better retention? Well, have you thought about the billable hour as kind of being a reason why maybe you're not able to retain these attorneys?
It is among the things we talk about now. Okay, with the terms, because yes, law firm, women and men enter the legal profession at a roughly 50-50 rate coming out of law school. However, men constitute around 66-68% of all lawyers, and at least in the US, and we have very similar numbers here in Canada, white people are at least 80%, probably higher. And when you combine all those combinations, if you to be white and male, you're 85% of all the partners in your average big law firm are white and male, right? Which is obviously vastly disproportionate to the population and to and just not just to the general population, but the population of legal talent that law schools are giving us. So why is that? Short answer, law firms are incredibly racist and sexist. And that is an entirely separate conversation that we can have. But especially around women, and this is the kind of the point that I'm sort of make, law firms, and this is like literally just out of the most recent article, law firms were built by and for, designed by and for white men of a certain generation at a certain age, right? The model that we know today is you can choose. The actual model we have now, the particularly pathological one, dates from about the mid-1980s. But you can go back as far as the first clever fellow who decided that he would bill his time by hour on an hourly basis. You could go back even 100 years if you were so inclined. And it's a different world. It's absolutely a different world. And expectations around, like if you were a working man, then all you did was work. You didn't have family time. You didn't play with your kids when they came home, right? No, your job was to bring home the bacon and be the breadwinner, and other food-related metaphors, which are very strange when you stop and think about it. And it's still the case today. So one of the reasons why women are constantly pushed out of law firms, that the firm says, well, I don't know, if you can't bill 2,000 hours a year, I don't know what to tell you. Bob can do it. Frank can do it. Why can't you do it? It's like, well, maybe because in our society, women have disproportionate responsibility for home care and for childcare and for running the world that we all live in and making it possible for Bob and Frank to go and spend 2,000-3,000 hours a year. But the law firm business model doesn't care about that. And I am increasingly of the opinion that's not a bug, that's a feature. So yes, I kudos to every person you've described who said, that ain't for me, thank you, kiss my dust.
Yeah. And I mean, I agree with everything you just said. And I do think that if you shift the business model of law, that does become, less of a thing, right? I'm not saying like getting rid of the billable hours is going to get rid of the racism and the sexism. That's not gonna solve that problem. But it allows for incentivizing efficiencies that the women, whether and we could disagree about whether it's a good thing or it's right that they have those societal pressures. I think we could say maybe it's not right that they have those societal pressures, but the reality is they do. And if they could be more efficient in their work and still provide incredible value to clients, and they're not quote unquote billing 2,000 hours a year, whatever that means, I think that you would see increased retention, in particular among the women population of lawyers at these large law firms.
I think you absolutely would. And I think maybe more importantly, we would all be able to take a step back and say, wait a minute, when did efficiency become a bad idea? Right? When like I have two lawyers, Bob takes 2,000 hours to get all of his stuff done. Jane takes 1,200 hours and gets the same amount of work done. Who do you think the client's going to like better? Who do you think has delivered more value to the client? Right? This, I wrote a piece a while back saying, you know what? Maybe the problem isn't that, women are leaving law firms at unusual rates. Maybe they're leaving law firms at perfectly rational, sensible rates because they know what a toxic environment it is. We should be asking, why are men hanging around and wasting their lives in these ridiculous operations? But those are not sentiments I normally start my law firm retreats off with. I save those for articles and for podcasts. So
Right. I mean, it's good to talk about it, at least let it stew for the longtime listeners. Hopefully this episode gets shared around. What about, though, the longevity of firms? I mean, you mentioned in your most recent article, I see Hush Blackwell, and I just recently learned how they have just stopped billing time.
Wow.
That is, I was at Legal Geek in Chicago, and one of their people were there, and I was asking about it. They're like, oh, yeah, we just stopped. We just stopped billing time. And it's like, so if and they're, thinking, the link and like virtual practice, like they're really thinking about the future. So that firm I could see surviving what I'm about to say. But in this non-billable hour, Gen AI powered legal practice world, with attrition rates being what they are and the lack of pipeline, Who wants to go build 2,000 hours? Not just work, build 2,000 hours when you could have a 3 to 4 day work week in another industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do we solve? I think the big law model, if it doesn't adapt like what Hush Blackwell is doing, it will collapse.
Oh yeah.
Do you foresee the same thing?
Yeah, I wouldn't even restrict it to big law, to be honest with you, because again, big law has its own pros and cons. It has its own pathologies unique to that kind of size, but it's also got a lot of the advantages that you can get from just massive human scale,
Mm-hmm.
including a great deal of redundancy around quality control.
Right.
But this larger idea that law firms of all kinds, and I worked just again a couple months ago with a 25 lawyer firm here in Ottawa, and the model is the same. The targets are the same, the incentives and the same. The culture is fundamentally the same. So and yeah, if the fundamental threat I think that faces the model is twofold. One is that because it is so geared around the idea that the way in which we measure the value that we provide, both externally to the client and internally to the firm, is based the amount of time and effort that is taken. Now that we are firmly ensconced in an era in which technology-driven efficiency is, again, massively compressing time and effort, because that is the foundation, and again, not just of the pricing, not just of the compensation, but of the advancement of the culture of what
Mm-hmm.
who are the most admired lawyers in a lot of law firms. It's the ones who are like cranking out the insane amounts of money and bringing this same amounts of work. So it is so, again, deeply bred in the bone that it's very, very difficult for people to envision beyond that. I talk to lawyers in these firms, and I describe to them just what I've said to you: Gen AI and compression of hours, inventory collapse. And they're like, but how else can I value my work? And they truly don't know, right? They don't have an answer to that. And that's really sad to me, fundamentally, is that nobody's ever introduced them for the tools that they can do this by. So that's the first piece of it. But the second piece of it, I think, which again is the other threat, is that these are businesses fundamentally that are far too, number one, they're too focused internally rather than externally. They spend way too much time and effort and involved in the internal matters. And the way that I always do this, again, I'll get up in front of a large group of law firms, and I'll say, I have every single law firm I've ever dealt with they track down to the last second, or at least, sorry, exaggeration, down to the last hour, every bit of time that lawyer spent doing stuff, and down to the last dollar, literally every amount of money that was actually billed, collected, rationalized, and they'll track it, and they'll do originations and sourcing and so forth. And they have a fleet of materials for this. I said, I have yet to come across a law firm anywhere that has so much as a spreadsheet with 3 columns. A, what did the client ask us to do? B, what did we end up doing? And C, what did the client think about that? Right? Like we don't care. We as a profession, as law firms, we don't care whether the client is happy with what we did for them or not. And the reason we know that we don't care is that we don't track it. So, right, you measure what matters. So when you have businesses that are fundamentally about themselves, that are focused on my time, my effort, my brilliance, my blah blah blah, everything else, that's not sustainable. And I know I've been saying not sustainable about law firms for a number of years, and perhaps I'll be saying it when I'm 95 years old and the rest of them, oh, one of these days the law firm will go down. I don't know, but I sort of really feel like with the advance of not just of Gen AI, but there's other technologies, we sometimes get taken off track, right? We sort of think, oh, it's all AI. I said, no, look, document automation, contract analysis software, document, all this stuff. This is the vanguard of the compression, the technology-driven compression of time. It is inevitable. This is the way things are going to be done now. And in fact, if we were starting from scratch tomorrow, if there had never been a law firm before and lawyers suddenly were foofed into existence and say, here, you're a lawyer, go make a business. No one's going to say, oh, you know what I think I should do? I should spend a lot of time on this and help people for my time. That's not how we do things in this era. And that, I think, is the inability. Isn't a failure. It's not a failure. I really don't think it's a failure of will. I've been in a lot of law firms, smart people, well-meaning people. They pulled me in, and not just me. I'm hardly the only person talking about this. Anybody who's doing consulting for 20, 30, 40 years will tell you this, that you'll go in and you'll be responsive to say, yes, I understand what you're trying to do. Here's A, B, C, and D, and E, and these are the steps you can take. And it's not that they don't want to, but they just can't. I go back to straitjacket. I go back to, just it is bred in the bone, and it's so hard to do that. But if you are a lawyer, or if you're a law firm that can break that straitjacket, then the world's your oyster. And if you're a lawyer who feels that straitjacket inside you saying there's got to be a better way, as you, again, can attest and your listeners can attest, there is a better way. And if I can't, and I know I can't, change the way law firms operate, they are what they are, fundamentally, I can at least go to lawyers and say, don't be afraid to try something different, to try something that's not been done before. I said in my last piece, there is nothing natural or normal about the law firm business model. It was not dropped from high, from Mount Sinai on stone tablets. It's an accident of history. You don't have to be a victim of the accident of history.
Mm-hmm. So many things there. I've had mention you didn't actually say it, but I'm sure you're familiar with it. I've had mentioned twice, maybe 3 times, Net Promoter Score from guests on the show. So I have it. There are at least 2 or 3 law firms out there, small, solo small firms that track Net Promoter Score. So they're out there. Yeah. I mean, I don't, but so there you go. Like, I'm the subscription attorney. I don't even track Net Promoter Score, right? but to those law firms that do the Net Promoter Score, they do have that spreadsheet of like, what does the client think about the service that that we provided? But it's like, lawyers are scared to ask that question because they know what the client's going to say. They're not going to be happy. Right.
I'll tell you, I'm working on a piece. I have a lot of pieces in my dark matter pieces, which is like, I may not actually publish this, but one of them really is around this idea because I'm always want to drill down. Okay, we don't ask. Why don't we ask? And I really think it's because we are deeply afraid of the answer. We're afraid the answer will come back, I didn't get value from you. I didn't like dealing with you. It was actually a negative experience. And because I personally have a belief, and the soapbox I have not talked about today, which is my largest, is the lawyer formation development process, which I think is utterly broken in this profession worldwide. We come into this profession absolutely unready. It's not imposter syndrome. We actually are imposters. Most of us have no freaking idea what we're doing. And the survivorship bias is huge because people say, oh, after about 5 or 10 years, I've got the hang of it. Yeah, you know what? A lot of lawyers didn't make it to 5 or 10 years. They left the profession. They went somewhere else, and that's not good enough.
And it's so common. We have a term for it, recovering lawyer.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, or lapsed lawyer, right? As I like to say, the Catholic in me likes to say lapsed. So that's and honestly, Matthew, if I do nothing else with the work that I'm doing, with the writing, everything else like that, it's if I can just get lawyers to look differently at this stuff, to look at it for the first time and say, hang on, why are we doing it? Why is this the standard? Why is this the default? Right? We don't know any better. People come into law firms without a clear sense of their professional purpose, without a clear sense of their professional values, and certainly in most cases, never having been in any kind of a workplace before, other than like Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts, right? We come in and you don't know, you spent 3 years in law school, you've heard all this high-minded stuff, and you come in with his 6 months, you're a very clearly communicated you are a cog, and nothing matters more than the machine in which you are cogging at the moment, right? And they see the behavior and they see the way people are treated, but they don't know. They sort of say, I guess this is normal. I guess this is the way it is. Okay, well, this is the way it is. And it's not. It does not have to be that way. I would like to take the profession and shake it by the lapels and say it doesn't have to be this way.
Yeah. I mean, we could spend another hour on legal education and training. I'll say that I should just comment on something that you just said, though, in the prior thing was, it's hard, if you're in the profession, if you're swimming in water. Didn't you also just quote David Foster Wallace?
Yes, I did. Yeah,
that's one of my favorite. It's one of my absolute favorite. I'd say it to my wife all the time, and sometimes things will happen, and she'll say it back to me. Like, we know that one so well. Yeah. And it's really hard. Like, you got the functional fixedness, like you're in it, you don't even know you're in it, right? Yeah. And when I do a lot of CLEs, and sometimes I get the question, well, we're at such and such size firm. How do we do it? How do we shift? You've convinced me we should stop billing time, but how do we do it? And you know what? Sometimes it's just easier to start again from scratch. Yeah. Like, it's just easy. Like, it's hard to pivot. Like, another example I like to give is American Express, right? And this
Mm.
was like way before my time, but American Express used to be traveler's checks.
Yeah, I
They
remember.
cannibalized their own business to move into credit cards. Like,
Yeah.
that's hard to do. That is incredibly hard to do. They
Hmm.
did it. So it can be done at a large company at scale.
Yeah.
And so you just have to like look at other examples of that. And then I think that that's sort of the way that you could do it. But it's like basically like spin up a new entity and
Hmm.
like you got to start from scratch is the easiest recommendation I could give.
Yeah, and I think, and if a new lawyer who starts a practice today, billing by the hour, it's like, no, come on, you're starting, you're getting off on the wrong foot. Like educate yourself beforehand. There's so much material out there now, so many guides, so much guidance available for setting up a practice which is not based around time in any way. And oftentimes, again, literally a lawyer said to me one time, well, how do you know how much you should charge for something? I said, how much? I said, how much? Why is your billable rate what it is? Right? I don't know. I guess it's what people have my year of call charge. So that's arbitrary. That's pulled out of a hat, right?
Yeah.
We're all making this up as we go along.
Oh, yeah.
Fundamentally, we charge something. And if it doesn't, and if it turns out you got your clock cleaned because you undercharged, okay, lesson learned. Next time, charge more. If you charge something the client flees, it's like, okay, I guess that was too high. Honestly, like you asked earlier about what I do. I do a lot of work for law firms and, strategic consulting, advising to managing partners and leaders, some speaking at events and things like this. And it's all, I don't charge anything by the hour, and it's not because I'm particularly high-minded. It's that what I do isn't best measured by hourly tracking. And on those rare occasions when someone says, no, I want to pay by the hour, I said, what's your hourly rate? And they tell me, I said, okay, that. Right, because
right. That's good. No,
yeah,
especially because you're talking to lawyers, so you know it's gonna be high, it's gonna be up there, so you'll be satisfied, right?
well,
Uh,
exactly. Yeah, yeah. No,
right.
it's never a problem. Like I had a friend of mine who he does a little bit differently. He says, what's your most junior partner's billable rate? I'll go with that because I don't want to suggest that I'm even as valuable as your most junior partner. But it's like, no, I'm gonna charge you what you're worth.
Yeah, yeah. I'm so glad to hear you say that because that was going to be my next question, Jordan. But also
Mhm,
like in that context, so glad to hear
mhm,
you're not billing your time. You did have to bill your time. So what was that like? And
mhm.
why are you not doing that anymore?
Oh, well, I mean, to the extent I ever billed my time, it was, like we all did very briefly in law firms. And like most of us, I don't like tracking my time. I don't like tracking what I do. I think if you're a knowledge worker, which fundamentally we are, even if you're doing the kind of stuff we're doing, it's not the kind of thing that lends itself to that, right? It's not the, the clock isn't a good measure of a whole lot of jobs. I mean, I suppose if you're, now I'm dating myself again, the old Looney Tunes cartoons with Sam and Ralph, the coyote and the sheepdog, checking in, morning Sam, morning Ralph, and they go down and and they start their daily fight over the sheep. I guess maybe it works there, but for most of us, it doesn't go that way. But I found that for the work that I was doing, I said, okay, it doesn't make any sense for me to try to do this by the hour because a whole bunch of reasons, but fundamentally,
Yeah.
the value that I was providing, I would either end up in a lot of cases underselling myself, in other cases overselling myself. So I said, okay, I need to come up with a fixed fee. And I remember very clearly, very early on in the process, I was starting this out. And AmLaw 100 law firm calls me up and says, hey, we're having a retreat at some insanely expensive resort in Florida. And will you come and speak to us? I said, sure, that'd be great. And how much? And I named a price that I'm embarrassed to tell you the price. And they said, oh, okay, yeah, we can afford that. I'm like, oh, that's not a good sign. When they're thrilled to hear your amount, then it's pretty good.
Right. Add a
Right?
zero next time, right? Basically.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And that was it was kind of embarrassing. It's like, oh man, I swung and missed on that. I absolutely but you know what? But the next time out, I just charged more. And and I would just kind of because sometimes you don't know. For what I do, there are no comps for what I do anyway. So I couldn't
Right.
really go to somebody else and say, what do you charge? But honestly, it got to a point of saying, what will the market bear and what feels fair to me? Where do I feel like I'm paying? And it isn't just a matter of keep cranking it up, because I remember the time I cranked it up one too high, even to a large law firm, and they were like, okay, we're going to go a different direction on this. I said, yep, okay, I found the ceiling, just banged my head off it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. But so there is trial and error. But here's the reason why I think lawyers, among the other reasons why lawyers resist it, it's the error part. it's like I did it and I failed at it and I messed it up and so forth. And we're just so, oh my gosh, I screwed up. And we're so hard on ourselves. One of the many reasons we have such toxic health situations as lawyers. But we're afraid of failure. We're afraid of looking bad. We're afraid of being told we don't know what we're doing, because that's the heart of our insecurity. And you just have to overcome that to say, I'll try it. And if it doesn't work, fine. No one's going to die. If I underprice my work, no one's going to be carried out of here in an ambulance. And the same thing if I overprice it, right? So
in these last 5 minutes here, I can't help myself but insert myself into your business model a little bit, Jordan. And that is, are you offering like an ongoing retainer or subscription at all into what you're doing, the services you're offering?
I am, and it's actually something I'm developing right now in terms of a new stream, which is an advisory service for law firm leaders. And the way it kind of started out was same kind of thing, right? To say, I'll charge a person. The person says, "This is what I charge. Great, we'll charge for that. And I'll track my hours and I'll do it." I'm not comfortable with it at all, right? I basically do it because the people there are more comfortable with it as well.
Right.
And so what I'm probably going to do is exactly what you've just described. To say, all right, it's going to be part of the website relaunch in hopefully the new year. But where I come up with a series of, these are specific things that I do, and I'm going to be, to the extent possible, putting the prices on the website, because I think transparency is really important too. And I'll say, for instance, you and I are going to meet online for 90 minutes once a quarter. And beforehand, I'm going to prepare a list of topics for us to discuss. And afterwards, I'm going to do some follow-ups. I'm going to find some materials. You're going to ask me to do a bunch of things and so forth. And it'll cost you this much per month. And I'm reasonably certain that's going to get a good reception, a good response. I know for a fact, of all the work that I do right now, I love that more than anything else. The straight advisory work, to say, let me help you with your burdens and your opportunities and responsibilities and visions as a leader of this operation. It doesn't have to be a law firm. And I get a huge charge out of that. I feel like I'm giving a lot of value. And it's me at my best self, right? Much more so than just getting up and saying, "Hi, good morning, and welcome to the show, and here's a presentation for you." So yeah, so it really will be fundamentally a subscription-based operation. So we'll see how it goes.
And there are different ways you could take this too, but in particular for the law firms that you're already doing keynotes at anyway, it could be after 1 year, every year of subscriptions, you get a keynote thrown in.
Exactly.
Or as long as you're a subscriber, and you haven't hit that year, 20% discount on a keynote, right? As long as you're a subscriber. Like you plus, you value add, you throw in some freebies. You want them to stay subscribed for the whole year. So after a year, they get a keynote presentation that's valued at X on the website. That's a pretty great reason to stay subscribed. You get the annual recurring revenue, and they get the extra keynote, and you both feel like you won. I mean, the subscription model. I mean, obviously, I do. I literally talk about it all day.
Well, yeah, and there's so many ways and you can ratchet up. Sort of say, the basic level is just this, but then there's the premium where you get that kind of a deal. And maybe at the platinum, gold level of platinum, I'm writing a quarterly strategic report for the legal industry, and you get exclusive access, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all sorts of ways in which you can develop it. But again, it's around what's my best use? What's my highest value? Where can I deliver the most bang for everybody's buck and gravitate towards that?
And you're already on Substack, and I know because I use Substack to publish as well, that you could have subscriber-only content on there that you only get access to if you are a member. And I'm pretty sure you don't even have to charge through Substack. You could just let people in. You could let freebie. They could pay separately. I mean, Substack doesn't want you to do that. It might be against the terms of service. I don't know. But you could do a private podcast that's only for the platinum level subscribers or whatever, right? Or maybe that's a low level offering. But anyway,
or it could be.
Yeah, we could talk about this all day, and I'm happy to again if you want to, Jordan. But final question for you, the fun one, and that is a hot dog a sandwich, and why?
Is a hot dog a sandwich, and why? I have never thought about that before. I'll give you my answer now, straight now. No. And why isn't it a sandwich? Because you had to ask me the question.
Oh, interesting. Gosh, that's really close to it depends, though. Like I feel like it's you think
if you'd said to me is a Reuben sandwich a sandwich, I'd say yeah, because it's called a sandwich.
Yeah,
it's called a hot dog. It's not called a hot dog sandwich, therefore it's not a sandwich.
That's interesting because I had to ask the question. I'll tell you what. It's not a super detailed explanation, but it's also a first in over 100 times I've asked the question, so I'll accept it. But I will tell you this quick story that I have video evidence of.
Yeah.
Took my 3.5-year-old daughter to a concert thing where there was a food truck, and I got a hot dog and fries.
Yeah.
And this might be like the second or third time she's ever seen a hot dog. And so I said, she's like, Daddy, what are you eating? I'm eating a hot dog. So, she goes, she plays around, she comes back, my hot dog's gone. She goes, Daddy, did you eat your sandwich? Because she forgot the word for hot dog, but she knew the word for sandwich. So I'm just saying that in the mind of a 3.5-year-old that doesn't have the word for hot dog, look, and just putting that out there into the ether.
Yeah, no, it's a good thing to have in the ether. No, it's a good way to test it. But no, I'm a great believer in there's a lot of meaning behind what we call things. There's a very old story about Abraham Lincoln being asked one time, Mr. President, if you called a dog's tail a leg, how many legs would it have? And he said 4. Calling it a leg doesn't make it one.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Substance over form, which lawyers should appreciate. Interesting. I like that. If people wanted to follow up, reach out. We mentioned the Substack one more time, jordanfurlong.substack.com. Where else, if people wanted to reach out to you, how could they best do that?
I'm still on Twitter, which I continue to call Twitter with increasing misgivings, but I'm still there, Jordan_Law21. Probably going to expand my presence at Blue Sky a little bit and doing a lot of work on LinkedIn these days because that seems to be the last remaining non-psychotic social media platform left. So you can find me there as well. So not many Jordan Furlongs out there, so I'm fairly easy to find.
Great. We'll stick around for 30 seconds, but we'll sign off one more time. Jordan Furlong, thanks again so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Matthew.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. Make someone's day by sharing this episode with them. The best way to get in touch is to follow and message me on LinkedIn. To get extra content, subscribe to the newsletter at www.lawsubscribe.com, where you can also become a paid subscriber to get episodes and content early. Until next time, this is Matthew Kurbis with Law Subscribed.